Good evening, everybody. I hope you're not too tired at the end of the day. Just concerning the questions and the topics we have been dealing with during the whole day, how non-formal education and formal education can go along together. I'm here to share the experience that Camaleonte has in the schools in Italy. Camaleonte is a private no-profit organization that deals with the personal and professional growth of young people as well as adults throughout outdoor experiential learning activities. And it's the founder member of a wider international network that's called Academy of Experiential Education. And we've been researching on experiential learning for developing competences of trainers and educators. So, maybe since many of you belong to this sector, the non-formal sector, maybe you might be familiar with experiential learning in the outdoors. But let me just tell you which are the main features of the experiential learning in the outdoors. First of all, it is a group experience. So this allows somehow the dynamics to happen, and individuals get involved personally in a wider context that is the group. And in the outdoors, because somehow the nature is the place that mirrors our human nature. And throughout nature, the physical, let's say, context and reactions are real and true. They're not simulated. So basically, if it rains, you get wet. If it's hot, you sweat. If you are on a hike, you really feel pain in your legs. You have blisters, and somehow this makes the experience real. And concerning this reality of the experience, the person is involved at a physical level, which is very obvious, at a psychological level because there is interaction in the group, and at a cognitive level because somehow there is problem solving involved, there is decision making, there is reflection as well involved, because it's not only about experiences, but it's also about reflecting on what happens during the experience. And basically, when we carry on our projects, the main factor is to challenge somehow the students, the young people, in, of course, let's say, unconventional or not daily activities. And the challenge is always by choice. When they come to our projects or to our programs, they are kindly invited to join, but we never force them because it has to be a personal choice of the learner, of the student. And this comes to the centrality of the learner. Normally in formal education, due to our educational system, or because of the lack of time, or also because there are programs that we have to respect, there is a passive role of the student. So before, somebody was mentioning, I wish that somehow students can be more active. It's not natural for a student to sit on the chair and listen for maybe an hour, 40 minutes, because the attention and the personal involvement is not there. In these kind of programs, in the experiential learning in the outdoors, the learner is an active participant, and this is why we normally ask the participant to be free in its choice of participating or not. And also the learning comes from the learner. It's not, let's say, the teacher, the facilitator, or the trainer saying what the learning outcome should be. But it's the learner that, out of experience, drives its own learning or insights. And coming to challenges, why is challenge so important in these kind of experiential learning outdoor activities? It is important because somehow it invites the students, the young people, to get out of their comfort zone. The comfort zone is a place where all of us feel comfortable in. We are somehow, it's our unknown sphere, it's our known sphere, something that we are in control of. What makes us, we are familiar with this. But sometimes what happens is that we get too comfortable in this comfort zone. And the challenge, let's say the function of the challenge is somehow to invite people to get out of the comfort zone in this discomfort zone. So having also something that it's not known, the unknown, going in the sphere of the unknown, to learn something new. Of course, the major work in when we are processing this kind of experiences is not for the learner to get in what is called the panic zone. So to provide a challenge that is too high for their competences. No, it brings them in a sphere where they are confronted with fear. Valdez was speaking about the fear this morning when he was presenting. And what we refer to as a model in our programs is mostly Kolb's learning cycle. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with this, but just let me briefly tell you let's say the dynamics and the stages of this cycle. So the students, the learners, come to a specific place, which is normally the national park in Sabaudia. They do concrete experiences, activities, no, which somehow challenge them. They reflect and observe either after the action, so after the experience, but also during the experience. So somehow, because facilitators are always there with the learners, so throughout reflection and observation of what happened, they start to notice things that were not so visible to them before. Then what do they do with what they notice? Somehow they start sharing this reflection in the group, and they get new insights and new learnings. So out of that, they make abstract conceptualization for themselves. So how can they transfer this learning, this knowledge, into the following activity? So, for example, if they find out that trusting their, let's say, their companions, their friends is something important to achieve a task, then they will apply it in the following activity. Or if they find out, for example, that active listening is important, so to listen first of all to what are somehow the rules of the activity, so to be careful when the briefing is provided, somehow this is out of their learning, and they try to apply it in the following activity. As I mentioned before, the core element of this entire process for us is reflection. Also, this morning it was mentioned that the essential function of reflection, which is this multi-layered process of identifying, clarifying, and exploring new things and that which is at stake. So either the activity or the dynamics, or even what happens inside the person. So inside the person, outside the person, and in the wider context, which is the nature or the other people who are together with the learner. So the reflection process is a process that somehow leads the person to a deeper awareness of what's happening on these three levels. And recently, Camaleonte has been and it's concluding a partnership on reflection, the function of reflection in formal and non-formal context, reflection as a tool for learning. And what we found out, it's an Erasmus Plus funded project that has seen also universities from 4 different countries in Europe involved, together with the consortium I was speaking about, of the Experiencia. What we found out is that reflection is not only, and it's not equal to thinking. So somehow reflection involves the entire person, in the mind, in the heart, and in the belly as well. Because somehow when we are experiencing things, we are there with our entire being. We are not just there with our brains. And most, in our society, unfortunately, this is one of our patterns that somehow we value more, the head, rather than all the rest. But if you think at many other cultures, like for example the Eastern cultures, Oriental cultures, we have other organs of perceptions rather than just the brain. We have the heart as well as the belly. And especially when we have the alignment of these 3 parts, this coherence of these 3 parts, we are much more authentic in what we do. And somehow we express our potential in a more effective way. So, just to share my experience, our experience in Camaleonte, we started with, let's say, suggesting or proposing marketing our activities in the schools. But at the beginning, we were just addressing the students, we were saying, okay, we are providing these experiences in the outdoors so that somehow they can train what are the so-called transversal competences. We can support them in developing their attitudes and changing their behaviors. But after a while, we start noticing that there was somehow a disalignment between what was happening there with the students, with the learners, and what was happening after this experience when they went back to school, in their class, so in their regular, normal activity, because basically these are 3-4 days residential experiences in the outdoors. Somehow there were changes occurring, in the learners, and teachers were no longer able to somehow cope with this change. The learners somehow were putting in discussion or somehow confronting the teacher and the authority of the teacher, because they were starting little by little to activate what is the so-called critical thinking. So they were questioning and they were confronting the teacher. So Somehow, out of this evaluation that we did together with the teachers of the school, we decided to create a program, which is this team building a new school. We thought that it was important because it promotes and accelerates the process of integration and trust among the group members, so the students in the class, in order to increase the motivation for learning. Someone was speaking before when we were listening to the interviews that motivation is one of the important elements. Sorry if I don't remember all the names of the people who intervened during the day, but I remember the contents. No, it's this behavior is the sum of these three things, and motivation is one of this. So we were questioning also the fact, if the student is not motivated to go in the class, and learn, where is the motivation to learn if he or she does not even want to go to school? And this program is also intended to create this favorable context for cooperative, critical, and reflective learning. Because in the classroom is not just, for us, it's not just the sum of individuals, who are there alone, but it's the group. The class is a group. So as a group, the group is a source for learning. And this is why in the classroom, for example, if your schoolmates talk while you're having a test, or if the teacher is trying to explain something, of course somehow as a learner you are distracted. So it is essential that in the classroom this context is created. What are the objectives of this team building a new school project about? So at a group level, so in the classroom, to create this growing community, because somehow the learnings of the individual can enrich and stimulate the insight of another learner. Because somehow reflection is also about making connections, and somehow it's an associative process, not only logical cause and effect. So this learning community is there for this reason, to promote inclusion. Somebody was talking about this structure of the formal context, to exclude, because we are putting marks and somehow asking people to perform the way we want them to perform, and not the way they would be able to perform. And how to do this? By valuing differences and by valuing the different intelligences. Gardner, more than 20 years ago, maybe also 30 years ago, was mentioning that there's not only the verbal linguistic and the logical mathematical intelligence, which is the, let's say, most valued, they are the most valued intelligences at school, but there are other intelligences. And so why not to value them? Why not to start from the strengths of the learner rather than what we believe that their strengths should be? And another of the objective is to promote this trustful atmosphere and the wellness in the classroom. Because if the individual or if the students, when they are in the classroom, are not they are not happy, they're not glad to be there because they are being teased, or rather because they are being judged. Of course, their learning process is not facilitated at all. And also for motivating the group and for individual and group growing process. Let's say at an individual level, this project is meant to develop the cognitive competences, learning to learn. So it's not only about receiving the information, but is how do I process the information so that I can make meaning for myself of what I am listening to. No, it's not just that I am sticking information in my brain because I might keep it for, I don't know, some time, but then it's gone after a while if it's not connecting to my personal experience and to my personal life. Problem solving, critical thinking, strategic planning, decision making, and as well as emotional competences, social and then the famous EQ and AQ. Acknowledging and naming one's emotions, which is very important. This intrapersonal capacity of reading oneself, active listening, teamwork, cooperation. And also learning from failure is about this this doing and checking, reviewing, and then doing again. And as well as developing these ethical competences. So acknowledging the value of rules, no? And as well, let me also tell you this, and also the value of sometimes breaking the rule, if it's the case. Respecting them and breaking them at the same time. Acknowledge and value differences. And from the side of the teacher, to acquire methodologies and methods for creating a learning context and a safe psychological environment where students and learners really feel free to express their potential and their thoughts, which is very important. Acquiring knowledge and competences for reading group dynamics, which is very important. I think many of you already have said it, that the role of teachers in today's context is very important, because the teacher has the difficult task to pass on the information and the knowledge, but as well has a difficult task to somehow handle the group, read the group and see what is important for the classroom in a specific moment and time. Is not always the same. It's the here and now that counts. And the here and now is the upcoming future. And as well as identifying for teachers, is identifying the different learning styles. I think some vowels are missing, different learning styles, and value the different intelligence profiles. But let me just tell you how this program is structured. It's structured in three main steps. There are meetings at school, and then there is a residential part in the outdoors, where students go out of their homes, they are not at school, and they stay 3-4 days in a national park. So the first step is that the educators and the facilitators go 2 or 3 times and just with the objective of getting to know each other, on starting to stimulate the group dynamics, starting to see or letting emerge the diversities, which are intelligence, the strengths, the abilities of each other. So basically we are trying to letting emerge what is the positive and the strengths. We start from the strengths rather than what is wrong, what we have to fix. And then these activities somehow promote dialogue, sharing between, amongst the students, but also between the teacher and the students, because it is a reciprocal process. It's not only a one-way process. We should increase a little bit of the trust, because it's also about trusting your schoolmates, but also trusting the teacher, and vice versa, the teacher trusting that somehow the learner can engage in the learning process. And to create a common group objective, and to share the expectation and to plan group objectives to be implemented during the school camp. So basically, we do these activities, we get them into a group dynamics, and then we ask them to take a picture of the reality in their class. So we ask them, for example, to what extent they trust their companions, or to what extent they feel judged or they feel listened, to what extent they feel comfortable in speaking to their teachers in a free and open way, and so on. And so we have a picture. So basically, we have like a template that they fill in, and then we process the data. After a month of these first activities and meetings at school, basically they come to this school camp. And what do they do in the school camp? Well, usually, according to the age of the students, we use two main metaphors. Up to, let's say, the first grade to the 6th or 7th grade, we use the metaphor, so until they are 11, 12 years old, we use the metaphor of the Lord of the Rings, sorry. Basically, they encounter Harold, who is the owner of this land of Arda, and he is somehow asking the help of the learners to somehow search for and reconquer the four elements of the earth that the orcs, how do you call them? The monsters somehow have stolen. On a metaphorical level, these orcs somehow are the people who are destroying the nature, who are not making good use of the resources, who are somehow oppressing the other. And to do this, so to help Harold, they train themselves and they do group activities. So you see a couple of pictures here. For example, they go on the dragon boat. Is this big Chinese boat? Normally there is the head of a dragon. This is why it's called a dragon boat. And they all paddle together in search of certain points that we ask them to find out. And this somehow helps them to find a rhythm together. It's teamwork for them. And at the same time, they have to be united, and help each other if they want to achieve the task. Or, for example, they have to, we ask them to become elements of the nature. So we do some meditation activities, and they are in the park, and we ask them to listen to the sounds, to listen to the smells, and this puts them in touch with the context they are in. And all this, with all these activities, they face and overcome their fears, because sometimes they even have to climb the trees, or they have to do things that are not common. No, it's not like playing a PlayStation. No, it's really something where you have to physically activate, emotionally activate also. And they cooperate for the problem solving. They have to deal with conflicts, because sometimes they argue, amongst them. And throughout this activity, they also start to nurture an environmental friendly attitude and behaviors. So if at the beginning, when they arrive, they throw, papers on the floor after eating their snack, then they start slowly even picking up what is not their rubbish, and throwing it. And so they start to develop a more conscious, let's say, way of being in the world, of being present in the here and now. They become autonomous. They start also to nurture and to develop this reflective competence, because during the activities and after the activities, we reflect together with them. They develop these communication skills, active listening, empathy. Of course, they do teamwork, and they have to manage and deal with changes, because, of course, we cannot arrange, for example, the weather. No, we can take care of the safety, but what we do as a group of educators, we just process them through this experience. So if it's raining, it's not that we go under a shelter, but they continue doing what they are doing with that weather condition. And so somehow they start developing also this competence of dealing with uncertainty, dealing with changes, and managing the changes as well. The last step, after 1 month, more or less, this residential school camp, we go again back at school to evaluate what has happened. So we monitor the transferability of their learnings on site during the residential camp in their classroom. So what happens? And this is what we go to monitor. So what we do then, we check the state of the class, and we deal with eventual conflicts. So we ask them and we interact with them. We evaluate and assess with the group how the commitments that they decided at the beginning of during the first step, if they really followed them, if they accomplished them. So, for example, if they said for themselves and as a group that they would improve, their active listening, or they would improve, for example, not teasing somebody, we go and check and monitor if this has really happened. And of course, we want to leave them empowered, empowered and motivated. We don't want to go away with problems, but we want to go away and make them ready for new challenges. And of course, during these steps, we are also accompanying the teachers, in dealing with the class. So we are coaching in the meantime during these 3 steps the teachers. Now, before finishing, I would like to share with you some of the insights, comments. These are coming from the students. For example, this student said, "I realized I didn't know at least half of my schoolmates." And this is just a simple issue. One could say, well, what is the problem? Well, it is a problem, because if you are for 2, 3, 4, 5 years with a group of people, knowing the name of that person is not enough to create a trustful atmosphere. You need to get in touch to make a connection with the person and with the teacher as well. And the teacher also. You know what? During one of our meetings with the teachers just realized that they didn't know the names of all their students. Which, of course, they say, it's difficult, it's challenging. But can you imagine a student, no, having somebody who doesn't even know his or her name? No, it's not a good, let's say, premise for building a trustful atmosphere and a context for learning. So here I had the chance to know them. So during the school camp, today during the hike, I wouldn't make it if I was alone. I am afraid of heights, but today the group helped me overcome my fear. This is very important. So, as Valdas was saying, is about a successful person is also somebody who is able to cope with his fear, no? Because fear is a human emotion. I learned the importance of trust. It's like when you can speak to someone and you feel you're not being judged. This is very important. When I feel that I'm not being judged, I really can disclose myself. I really can explore. And I've heard before from the previous interventions, this exploration phase is very important for the learning to happen. No? Otherwise, we are always dealing with standardized way of working, learning, and somehow living in our society. When I was fighting with ogres, this is how they're called, I didn't remember that, I was afraid. However, I discovered I am agile and strong. I succeeded in finding 2 of the 4 precious stones. I feel I'm courageous. So can you imagine this student, just discovering that she has courage inside, no? It makes, for the self-esteem and for facing challenges, is very important. The most meaningful moment for me was when we explored the bushes. I discovered how beautiful nature is. This was the moment I felt more reflective. So this is just an example of how nature also facilitates and provides a supportive context for reflection and for introspective reflection. Today I discovered I don't know how to read a map. I want to learn how to do it. I want to be able to orient myself. Also, this competence, a competence of reading a map is important, because how many times we'll be traveling abroad and we have the necessity to find our way and find places. The most meaningful moment for me was when I climbed the tree. I didn't expect to succeed. In that moment, I felt anxious, but very satisfied to have reached the object. And satisfaction is a very important component in learning. This morning, now I'm confused about but in the previous intervention, in one of the previous interventions, there was mentioned Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, no? It's this, and the flow that we have. Satisfaction is not only about earning more, but satisfaction is also this balance between my competences and the challenges I have to face. And it's this finding the flow in this. Somehow we discovered by doing this together with the teachers. We have now a learning community of teachers. Every year we meet, and it's getting bigger and bigger. It's an opportunity for them to share the experiences, to share the practices, to speak about what's happening in their schools, and to get some theoretical inputs from our side, but also to try out something, to experience themselves something. Because one thing is reading, about the theories. I can know about the theory, I can illustrate it, but then the effects a certain theory has on me that I'm experiencing it, it's different. So this is also an opportunity out of the learning community for teachers to experience something and to get their own personal insight and their own personal theory about how to process learning and how to process the group. Thank you very much. Ačiū.